Welcome to NTD's China in Focus. I'm Don Ma. Our top stories. Tensions mount over a clash in the South China Sea. The U.S. issuing a statement supporting the Philippines after a Chinese Coast Guard ship collided with Filipino boats. A top executive from Goldman Sachs warning investors not to pour money into Chinese stocks right now. More on why. A new effort on Capitol Hill targeting TikTok. A bill gives the social media app an ultimatum. Separate from its Chinese parent company or risk getting banned. And more Chinese immigrants are illegally crossing the U.S. southern border than ever before. Last year's numbers doubling the past decade combined. But how and why are they getting here?
I left China because I was not able to save any money. It was really difficult to support myself.
Tensions over a clash in the South China Sea are brewing. The U.S. issuing a statement Tuesday saying it stands with the Philippines and that the Southeast Asian country's actions in the South China Sea are, quote, lawful. This came after Chinese Coast Guard ships collided with Filipino vessels Tuesday. Manila said Chinese ships fired water cannons at Filipino boats, which were on their way to resupply troops stationed on a disputed shoal.
It's still illegal and irresponsible actions ng China to illegally prevent us from doing our routine mission.
The water cannons shattered the windshields of the Filipino boats. 4 crew members also suffered minor injuries. The Philippines said the Chinese Coast Guard's dangerous maneuvers led to a collision between the two countries' vessels. Both China and the Philippines claim portions of the South China Sea, though Beijing claims almost all of it. An international court has ruled China's claim invalid. Beijing also reacted on Wednesday, saying its Coast Guard was restrained in a clash with Philippine ships. Over in the Pacific, Australia is expressing concerns about the incident.
I am very concerned, and Australia is concerned about any unsafe and destabilising behaviour in the South China Sea. It is dangerous and it creates risks of miscalculation, which can then lead to escalation.
Just 2 days ago, Australia said it would give over $40 million to countries around in the South China Sea to bolster their maritime security. Don't invest in China right now. That message coming from the Chief Investment Officer at Goldman Sachs Wealth Management Branch. The statement comes as Beijing projects financial ambition, setting a 5% goal for economic growth. What are the CIO's reasons for backing off? Watch.
Chinese stocks are slumping, and some may wonder if it's a good time to invest since stocks are cheap. Here's a piece of advice from one of Goldman Sachs' chief investment officers. One should not invest in China right now. Sharmeen Mosavar-Rahmani is the chief investment officer of Goldman Sachs' wealth management business. Her statement comes as China's premier predicted the country's economy would grow by 5% this year. He set the goal during China's most important political meeting of the year, called the Two Sessions. Speaking to Bloomberg TV Monday, Investment Officer Rahmani listed her reasons for backing off from investing in China. First off, she believes China's economy is going to slow down for the next 10 years. Second, the country's policy uncertainty. It's unclear what China's direction will be in the long term. He also added that China's pillars of economic growth have been weakened, including the property market, infrastructure, and exports. Lastly, data remains unclear. China said its economy grew by over 5% last year, but Rahmani said most people think that is not the real growth number, and that it was actually much weaker. All in all, her conclusion is, quote, "We don't recommend clients move into China at this point."
Federal agencies could soon be blocked from contracting with Chinese biotech firms. A new bill approved by the Senate's Homeland Security Commission on Wednesday aims to do just that. It would restrict business with companies like BGI and Biotech on national security grounds. That's to prevent the Chinese Communist Party from accessing Americans' personal health and genetic information. The companies have said the measure contains false allegations. A similar bill introduced in January accused Biotech of colluding with the Chinese Communist regime's military. The new measure must pass the full Senate and House and be signed by President Biden before taking effect. Social media giant TikTok, once again in the hot seat, facing two options: sever ties to China or face a U.S. ban. That's as the White House says it's backing a bipartisan bill aimed at targeting TikTok's assets to the U.S. market. NTD's Sam Wong has details on the new legislation.
It's another round of action targeting TikTok.
And allowing a CCP-controlled entity like TikTok to become the dominant media player in America would be like if in 1962, at the height of the Cold War, right before the Cuban Missile Crisis, we'd allowed Pravda and the KGB to purchase the New York Times, the Washington Post, ABC, and NBC.
On Capitol Hill Wednesday, a bipartisan group of lawmakers announced new legislation titled Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary Control Application Act. The bill specifically describes TikTok and its China-owned parent company ByteDance as threats to U.S. national security. If the bill passes, TikTok will face two options: either to divest from ByteDance within about 5 months, or to face a total ban from all web hosting services in the U.S. A TikTok spokesperson responded to the legislation, saying it will trample on First Amendment rights of 170 million Americans. But lawmakers said the bill isn't about going after the app itself, but rather to address concerns surrounding its ownership structure.
Our goal is to decouple TikTok and other platforms from the malign influence and control of the Chinese Communist Party.
Americans' data is always at risk of seizure by the CCP.
This is a CCP-controlled company claiming to stand up for constitutional rights while simultaneously engaging in slavery and horrific human rights abuses.
What's more, the legislation also allows the White House to designate certain applications controlled by foreign adversaries, namely China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. Experts and top U.S. officials have long voiced concern over ByteDance's ties to the Chinese Communist Party. More specifically, that it could force TikTok to submit American users' data.
The legislation that we've got out today is a product of particularly the last year's worth of work. People are starting to recognize that this isn't just about my data might be not being used properly. No, that data is being used to attack you and attack our country.
The House Energy and Commerce Committee will mark up the bill Thursday. Reporting from Capitol Hill, Sam Wong, NTD News.
An influx of Chinese nationals are flooding into the United States, illegally crossing over from Mexico. The numbers have grown exponentially in the last year. But unlike refugees fleeing from countries in turmoil, these immigrants are leaving the world's second largest economy. Why? Let's zoom in.
As soon as we pull up, they rush towards us. My mic not even on. But that doesn't stop this crowd of Chinese migrants from venting to producer Yong Shong. They're angry having to wait in the cold for Border Patrol. This is just one of 3 makeshift border camps we stop at in eastern San Diego County. Alongside migrants from Latin America, at each camp, we meet dozens from China. The numbers reflect the surge. From 2013 to 2022, CBP recorded fewer than 16,000 Chinese migrants illegally crossing the U.S. southern border. This past year alone, more than 31,000. That's roughly double the prior 10 years combined. But unlike those fleeing countries in turmoil like Venezuela, Cuba, or Haiti, these migrants are leaving the world's second largest economy.
What was the reason you left China?
Their answers vary.
His family is poor.
Most cite deepening financial hardships.
How did you get here? How did you get to Southern California?
Their trek north primarily starts in one Latin American country, where Chinese do not need visas to enter.
To Ecuador. How many of you here came through Ecuador?
We uncovered an assortment of travel packages offered specifically to Chinese migrants. You can pay smugglers who promise to ease some of the planning stress. For $9,000 to $12,000, flights, hotels, transportation booked for you. For $20,000 or more, it's a premium service, getting you to the Mexico side of the US border, skipping some of the more treacherous crossings.
Your parents still think you're in China? They have no idea you left?
Yeah. We meet the 28-year-old back in Quito after he was robbed at gunpoint in Colombia. I left China because I was not able to save any money. It was really difficult to support myself, he tells me. He says some employers in China refuse to pay him even after working. Even if they say the Chinese economy is strong, it is all about the upper class, he says. I wish I was never born. Living feels so exhausting. Over 2 weeks, Zheng travels through 5 Central American countries, at times messaging Chinese-speaking smugglers who remotely coordinate with local cartels to get him and others on vans, buses, boats, and on flights. It cuts his travel time down to about half that of most Latino migrants. But it's costly. By the time he reaches northern Mexico, he has spent more than $10,000, with one more border to go. A camera we set up facing the U.S. southern border captures weeks of crossings, thousands entering the U.S. through this gap in the wall. Group after group, day and night, you can hear these migrants shouting in Chinese. They end up where we started, San Diego County, burning fires through the night to keep warm, and during the day, expecting Border Patrol to pick them up. Just before New Year's, Zheng messages us that he too has crossed into the U.S. and is waiting to be processed for asylum.
American.
Joining the thousands who've crossed before him and the many more to come.
A Dutch nation is reducing its footprint in China as foreign investment continues to decline there. The Netherlands announcing a plan to close its consulate in one of China's major hubs. Here's more.
In a statement posted to the social media site X, the Netherlands shuttered its consulate in the city of Chongqing and will move the operations to China's capital, Beijing. Dutch economic leaders say the reason for the closure is due to the limited business opportunities in the region. The move comes as the Chinese Communist Party struggles to draw in and maintain foreign investors. The relationship gap between Beijing and Brussels continues to widen since the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The Netherlands Intelligence Service has called China one of its country's important trade partners that pose the greatest risk to Dutch economic security.
Looking at all of Europe, the Netherlands imported the most goods from China last year. As for what the Netherlands exports to China, one special machine is critical for China's high-end semiconductor production. Dutch company ASML is the only company in the world that can produce a kind of advanced lithography machine. Not having them poses a major roadblock for any country's AI development. Earlier this year, ASML limited its sales of that equipment to China after a U.S. request. Now, Washington is targeting the devices that Chinese companies bought from ASML before that restriction. The Biden administration is urging its Dutch counterpart to stop ASML from providing repair services for its machines in China. And that's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. We're now sharing a shortened version of our program here after being demonetized for 3 years. If you would like to support us, consider donating. Find us at donorbox.org/China-in-focus or subscribe to our partner platform Epoch TV, where you can watch our full episodes. Here's what to look out for in our second half. How did U.S. administrations, past and present, fail to recognize an existential threat and defend against it? Co-authors of the book Embracing Communist China break it down.
How is it that a country grew spectacularly to become the most formidable threat that the United States has ever faced? And also, why did the U.S. do nothing about it?
And a real-life Spider-Man mesmerizing Filipino onlookers as he scaled a 47-story tower in Manila, harness-free. More on the French free climber's surprising reason behind the ascent after the break here on China in Focus. Thanks for watching China in Focus. I'm Don Ma. See you tomorrow.